Hi, good day, everyone. It's Jim Norris from Backstage Insider. We're very lucky today to have with us Rik Emmett, who has a long career as a preeminent guitarist with the legendary band Triumph, of course, and many other highlights in his long career. So, yeah, Rick, it's good to see you.
Good to
You're
see you
looking
too,
good.
Jim.
And so I just want to go back to your early days, like many years ago. Your family influence, was your family musical, or was there encouragement there to become a musician?
My mom sang in the church choir, and she loved music. There was always radio go in the house, and we didn't have a piano. But when I was about maybe 8 years old or 9 years old, I had a harmonica, and my mom I started making noises, and then my dad was able to track down a guitar. So my grandfather brought it over. It had been in his sister's, closet. And it had, a a hula dancer and some palm trees stenciled on the front of it. And it was essentially a catalog kind of a acoustic guitar. But that was, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan in 64, and in February of 1964 was, I think, that was a cataclysmic event for people of my age. Um
Sure.
So, that was when that all started, but my mom had dragged me to the choir practices. Was a boy soprano, in the church choir and in the school choir. I sang at the May Festival concerts, at Massey Hall, uh, when I was maybe grade 5, grade 5 and grade 6, I
Wow,
think I did that. So that would have been, man, like 64, you know, in and around there, 63, 64. So, yeah, that's where it started, and, yeah, I played, sort of garage bands, basement bands, that sort of thing. So, peer group was probably as important as family, you know, and then, well, geez, I would say, by the time I got to high school, I went to Bloor Collegiate in Toronto, and there was a guy, Hans Gasteiger was the conductor of the orchestra, and I played violin for 4 or 5 years in the orchestra. So there was that
wow,
exposure too, pretty good.
that's great. So lots of encouragement there in your family, which is really important.
Well,
So are you
I don't think my dad ever believed that it was the story I like to tell about my dad is that years later, I had bought them a house sort of a couple of blocks from where we live because my wife and I thought it would be great to have built-in babysitting close at hand.
right?
And my dad stood in front of the house on the street and looked at it and turns to me and goes, "So I guess this music thing is working out for you." Like, he was
That's
from that
great.
generation that, didn't necessarily think that a musician had that was a real job. So,
That was true. I think that was the general knowledge. If you said you're a musician, yeah, but what's your real job?
yes,
What was
exactly.
people that you knew didn't make a living at it. So you played in various bands throughout high school, and then when did you connect with Gil?
Uh, I was playing in a band called Act 3, and we were playing at the Hollywood Tavern in Etobicoke, which was on the Queensway, strippers by day and rock bands by night. And,
Right.
and it, um, that was a sort of a B lounge kind of circuit that Act 3 was working, and it was a very progressive kind of just a trio, but, um, and then, when Gil and Mike were starting the idea of Triumph and they started looking around for guitar players, they came and saw me playing there one night and sat me down and said, "Listen, we think you might be the right guy to be in our band. We're doing this thing, and we've got a record deal with Attic Records, and here's a check from the record company. We're not making this up. We've got promo. We should get together and jam." And at the time, Act 3 had just gone through a change where, the original 3 guys had been me and Denton Young, who ended up having a band called Zon later on, and Chris Brockway was the bass player. And that combination of 3, I really believed in it, and I really felt it was great, but then there was some, tension and issues between Chris and Denton, and Chris quit. And so we'd replaced him, but it just wasn't the same. And so when Gil showed up and Mike, that, they were catching me at a time where I was questioning everything. And I was eager to move out of my parents' house, and which I wasn't in very often because we were out on the road, playing bars in Windsor and Wallaceburg and Haileybury and Brockville, and, we were all over the place. But Ontario, B Lounge stuff. And here were these guys saying, "No, no, we can play high school concerts," and Gil had a booking agent's license that they were both sort of tied into the union because Gil sat on the board, and, of course, Mike's
Right.
dad had been Sam Levine had been the vice president of the union for a long time, played in the TSO. So there was this very strong, the two of them, they gave off an aura of, oh man, and I said, well, can you give me enough money, guarantee me enough money a week that I could move out and live in a rental place with my wife and my best friend, the French horn player. And they went, "Yeah, yeah, $175 a week. Yes, we guarantee that, whether we gig or not." And I went, "Okay." And 175 a week was what I used to get paid when I was in Justin Page, which was the first
Right.
sorta professional rock band thing I'd landed in, you know? Like, just to take a step back for a second, when I was in high school, I was a kind of a ne'er-do-well jock, played all sports, but I tore my knee up when I was 17, and the whole dream of, being an athlete or a professional athlete, that was never gonna happen. My knee was now just way too wonky. So, I went and got my union card, and I, got serious about music, got myself a Fender Telecaster and a Fender Abbott Long& and McQuaid's, and away we went. A friend of mine got me into the circuit of, Jewish wedding bands and bar mitzvahs and that sort of thing, so I was a jobbing, playing kinda guy when I was still in high school, really. But that, of course, now rock bands, that was moving up to another level too, and one thing led to another. But Page had hired me, and eventually I'd worked my way up to $175 a week working with him. So, yeah,
Yeah, that was a lot of money in those days.
it was alright, between my wife's, paycheck and mine, and then, I think my, friend Andy Brackus was still at U of T, playing French horn, but he had student loans and stuff, so he could contribute to rent. Between the 3 of us, we rented a house, 530 Dufferin Street. It was right beside the corner variety store, right where the bus stopped.
That's great. So do you recall your very first gig with Triumph? Where was that?
Simcoe County District High School. Yes.
Okay.
I can't remember what we got paid, but it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 or $1,400 or something like that, you know. And
Right.
we had trucks, large. I think we didn't maybe have a transport truck, but we might have had a 5 ton or something like that that pulled up to the school. And and I think if it wasn't that gig, there was one in the first month or so where Gil ended up in a bit of a shouting match with the vice principal. He didn't want to pay us because the truck had ruined the grass when we backed the truck up
So
to empty the gear in through the loading door of the gym. Yeah, we'd wrecked his grass and he didn't want to pay us. But you know, he's got a rebel streak in him. Still
he
he has
does.
that. But I was just telling somebody the other day, he was a great band leader to be able to be in a band with, because he was always so resourceful. Like, his garage was full of PA equipment, and he knew guys that would be road crew guys, and this guy would drive the truck, and this guy would run the lights and sound, and, like, he was already pretty solidly established as the Birdman of Mississauga, like running a
Right.
PA company out of his garage. I think that's how he and Mike met. Mike was managing Lee Ashford, and you know, Gil rented them a PA or something. And then Mike ended up playing in Gil had a band called Abernathy Shagmaster, which was a sort of
I
a
remember
weekend.
that.
Yeah.
It's
So
a name you never forget, that's for sure.
no, that's right. And the musicians called it Abby Shag, but its full name was Abernathy Shagmasters Wash and Wear Rock and Roll Band. So that
Yeah, I
was
remember that. That's
like
crazy. So how did it get from playing high schools, I guess in the mid-70s, to, headlining at arenas in the, early '80s?
I would like to take some credit for this, Jim, but I seem to recall there was one night, it was maybe like a Thursday night at the Tudor Tavern in Cambridge, Ontario, and we were playing high schools and split weeks in bars, so we would pick up bar gigs every now and then. And when we first started playing in these bars, oh my God, we lined up around the block, people, couldn't wait to get in. But now the novelty of this thing was wearing off, and Triumph was playing Led Zeppelin cover sets. Like we'd go on and play a medley that would last for a half an hour of Led Zeppelin stuff. And the club owners loved it, but I can remember sitting there just and this gig had been sort of weekly, sparsely attended. And I can remember sitting between on the breaks with the guys in the dressing room going, this is not the way, not to sound like a Mandalorian, but I'm going, this is not the way. Uh, because if we don't play original music, and there was a band at the time called Liverpool, very successful Beatles cover band that would, they worked all the time. They made good money, but they were playing Beatles songs. And I went,
Right,
this is not the way to, if you want to be a recording act with your own records, we got to write our own songs. We got to be our own, we got to play concerts where we're playing our own music and having that argument with them because it was a money argument, Oop,
right.
you still there? Yeah, sorry. So I said, no, we got to stop. We got to tell the agents no. Uh, now, I think of it as being my idea, but it might have been a sort of a collective. We were all sort of gravitating towards this. But I can remember we were with Music Shop International at that time or something, and it was like, okay, we're going to have to tell the agent, no, we're not going to take split weeks in bars anymore. You got to start getting us concerts. And I think the first one was at the Olympium in Etobicoke. And it was like we'd already played every Etobicoke high school there was, so it was like that's a good place to try it, and it worked. We sold a lot of tickets, and yeah. So then it was like, okay, so this can be done. Now at the same time, we were, radio was maybe starting to happen in the States a little bit. The whole thing had happened about going to Texas and because of a radio station playing a song there. So I think there were other things that were happening that sort of it's elevating not it's elevating the game. It's not necessarily elevating the amount of money you're making or but
Right.
little things are starting to happen where yeah, it's you're never just getting kicked from one direction. It's always from a variety of things.
So that was, a leap of faith, I guess, I think a lot of artists go through that they get, a comfortable income, but it's not very creative or it's not aimed at being really successful. But that leap of faith, there's a lot of financial implications because obviously you start doing arenas, your costs go through the roof, and, obviously
Yep.
that one gig showed you it could work, which is great.
Yeah, Gil and Mike were pretty fearless though, and they really believed in themselves. The Triumph documentary, there's a scene where Michael Cole is talking about they'd booked us to play CPI concert production said booked us to play Massey Hall, and then Massey Hall wouldn't let us use the pyro, the flash pots and we had a flamethrower. Again, Gil
Right.
Moore, larger than life. We had we had a torch, and it was and Massey Hall said, "No, you can't play here." And then Michael Cole's and so it was like, "Well, what are we gonna do?" And Gil and Mike said to Michael Cole, uh, well, let's do the concert poll at Maple Leaf Gardens." He goes, "Are you nuts? You haven't even sold out Massey Hall yet." You know, like, concert bowl at Maple Leaf Gardens is like 6 or 7,000 seats. No, we're not gonna do it. And I think Gil and Mike said, "Well, if you lose any money, we'll write you a check for your losses." Because
Wow.
Gil and Mike were the kind of guys where they weren't just, pretty good musicians. They were maybe even better as businessmen. We had loans from the credit union of the musicians union. We had bank loans. Gil co-signed a bank loan with me. There was a guy named Brian Lucas at a TD Bank in Mississauga so that I could buy a wall of Marshalls. Like this was Gil's thinking, right? Like this is how you do it. So the
Right.
idea of escalating up to the next, they were not afraid to buy the machine that would pump the helium into the balloon so that the balloon could fly. Like that's how they thought. And to be around them was, you know, education for me at every level. It was like, oh, yeah, right, okay, So that sense now, I will say this, Jim. Like I did match them in the sense of I had creative aspirations and I was ambitious. We would go into the studio and I would want to be doing things where they would be going, "Rick, you're nuts." And I would be going, "You got to trust me." Like I have good instincts about this and I believe in my own talent and my ability. And if you will let me showcase that and not just keep dumbing it down to a low common denominator, I think this band can be special and can be unique and can make recorded product that will make a difference. But they were suspicious of a guy that was, progressive in terms of music, But I
Right.
swear to God, Jim, like the first album, there's a song called Blinding Light Show, which I dragged from Act Three. And in order to have wind sound effect, I stood in front of a microphone going, "Shh," like, and then layering it and putting it together in order to create this effect, which the other guys didn't think like that. And I would say, no, 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 we're going to harmonize this. It's going to be like a wire choir. There's going to be 4 guitar parts that rise here. So Gil, just play drums for 16 bars and don't worry, I'll fill it up later. And he would be going, "Oh man, you better be right." So anyways, I think that was one of the things that made it happen was that there was an equal amount of sort of ambition from different
Right.
sources.
So during the 80s, that must have been a pretty exciting time when the audience was growing, the records were doing well, and you were, doing some pretty big concerts and festivals.
Yeah, I would say that, for me, that really intensely fun period of growth was maybe 78 through about 81, 82. And then there were tensions within the band that made it so that now it was seeming like, oh, I'm involved in an obligation here that uh, I was questioning it. So some of the things that you're mentioning, like big outdoor shows, there was a summer in '83 where the resolution had sort of been, let's just grab as much money as we possibly can. So we're not going to take the rigs on the road, and we're gonna play outdoor shows, and we'll be up the bill, but we'll get paid an awful lot of money. And we opened for Journey, and we played the World Series of Rock in Milwaukee, and we played the World Music Festival in Texas that was like, you know, uh, and then that led to the US Festival, in '83. So there were all these things that were and it cemented the band in a way that we were now in a league with, at the time, Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue and Van Halen, and there were all these bands that were all, and now Triumph was one of them. We were in there with this grouping of all of these hard rock acts that were selling out. arenas and stadiums and stuff. And, got to play on stage with Ted Nugent and, Sammy Hagar and, that was '83. And then there was all the brouhaha of suing RCA Records, and that didn't go well, and then we were having to try to find a white knight, and then we moved to MCA, and we had a lot of debt now, like millions of dollars of debt that was, you know, uh, sitting there as an advance from MCA, and now you needed to sell 2,000,000 records out of the box just to break even. So,
Right.
Gil and Mike's, vision of how it would keep growing, it was like I was thinking like, "I think you guys are now, dreaming in Technicolor," so there was that tension.
So then, I guess it was around 1988 you decided to leave Triumph, and after that you, started your solo career?
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was unhappy in Triumph from about 86, 87. I think, your Canadian Musician magazine, we were on the cover where I was literally sort of pulling their shirts and biting one of their shirts or something. It was like the tension that
Right.
was in the band was real. That was a picture that sort of made it seem like, oh, because we always did have a sense of humor about each other, about the situation, about the absurdity of a rock and roll roller coaster ride. Um, so it kept us together and working. But man, the album we made in '87 that got us on the cover of your magazine, that was a horrible, horrible experience, to have to live through. And then the album after that, it was like, "Okay, this is the end. I'm not doing this ever again," you know?
Right.
So, and it took me 20 years to get over that, you know, and leaving the band and all of the business, the lawyers and the fighting and it was just nuts. But, yeah, I left in '88 and, went out on my own, and, I made a nice record deal with Charisma in the States, and then our first album came out and they went bankrupt. Like, literally, one morning I woke up and my manager, Ross Monroe, had phoned or left a message or something. Again, this might have been before there were texts and emails, but
Right.
it was like, "Hey, guess what? Charisma has gone bankrupt." I'm going, "What?" Like, and I think what they'd done is overspent in promoting the Right Said Fred, "I'm too sexy for my" whatever it was. And so, now this legit record label that I thought was gonna be promoting my record in the States, there was no more radio promotion, there was no more in-store, there was nothing, it was gone. And it was like, "Oh my god, okay, what next?" But, in truth, the world was changing, the arena rock was on its way out and grunge was on its way in and, all of this stuff was changing, and I was getting too old for it, so
So, during that time as well with your solo career, um, you embarked on a bunch of other ventures, wrote a book, you've done teaching over the years and I guess diversified a bit. And during your solo career as well, the styles of music that you played were really varied. If you look at the different albums and your live performances, it certainly wasn't just Triumph style music that you were playing anymore. It was it was different, all kinds of different styles.
yeah, I would say the first 3 albums that I made, I had a record deal with Duke Street Records in Canada, Andy Hermant, and Ross Monroe was sort of in-house at the time, and he was my manager, and, I was hoping that I would get on the radio with those and that it would be a pop kind of, that there would be commercial pop implications from the music that I was making. It was an extension of what Triumph was, except now I'm hoping I can do the same thing just as a solo artist. But the returns on that were, going down to the point where it was like, well, there's no point in chasing this anymore. So around It was about 1995, around there, 95, 96. I went, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell off a bunch of gear. I'm going to build a digital facility in my basement, and I'm going to start making the records that I always dreamed I wanted to make, because the whole indie thing had now started to happen. So there was a place
Right.
in Toronto called Joe Radio where you could, if you brought them, manufactured product, you could you could sell independently. You didn't need, you'd have to do mail order fulfillment, all this kind of stuff. Anyways, I went, well, I'm going to become an indie label, my own little indie label, and I'm going to make. So the first record I made was classical guitar, just instrumental. And then the next one was arch top jazz swing kind of stuff. And then the next one was sort of blues. And I can remember walking around. I made a distribution deal, a manufacturing deal with the EMI, because I knew Dean Cameron and Shan Kelly, and I'd be walking around up there in the. So my wife had worked for Capitol Records for a while in the '70s, and so that had been sort of this one thing had led to another, and I knew these guys, and I called them up, and so and Shan was saying, "Yeah, man, this blues album is really great. It's like you're an encyclopedia of blues, and you're making an album that's sort of like you're going to touch." And I go, "Well, I'm not necessarily trying to do that. I'm just doing what I feel I can do naturally well, and that's what the record is." But he said, "Well, it's like a bluesology kind of, greatest hits kind of a thingy." And he said, "It's great." And I went, "Okay, well then this is me. I'll just keep bouncing around doing projects, um, where I'll eventually get around to some singer-songwriter stuff. I'll do all of these things." It was eclectic. Um, and yeah, so I did that for a while. But of course, I'm still going out play gigs. I'm the guy that used to be the guy, so I can still get, every year I would get my work visa and go to the States and be playing, and then in the summertime I could play outdoor shows, and I could, do those kinds of things, festivals and that sort
Right.
of stuff. But then it was also like, well, what else am I going to do with my life? I better, yeah. And I sat on the advisory board at Humber College, and then the guy that ran the program at the time, Brian Lillos, said to me, "Hey, man, nobody likes teaching our music business course, but you'd be great at it. You'd be perfect." He smooched my butt in a way that made me go, "Oh, well, thank you, Brian." And he goes, "Look, you should just part time. You just come in, one day a week, and you just do this." And that's how it started. And and I liked it. I enjoyed it. There's a the late, great, beautiful Denny Christensen, who became the music director after Brian. At one point, we were sitting and he said to me, "Rick, you're one of the most pedantic guys I've ever met." And I looked at him like, and he went, "No, no, but I mean that in the nicest way possible. Pedantic, like, you're interested in explaining things, and you're academic, and you're very thorough." And he goes, and I go, "Okay, Danny, I'll take it as a compliment then." you know, but I do think that there were people on the, like, folks that had PhDs that were on that faculty that kind of looked at me like, "Who does this guy think he is?" Like, and in truth, I mean, I don't have a bachelor's, never mind a master's, never mind a PhD. So, but I sat on committees and I wrote curriculum and I pedagogy and like the whole bit. I was into it. I liked it. And I would do it often, and I would say, "No, no, I'm not going to submit an invoice. I don't care. I'm doing this because I like teaching and being around the kids, and I like getting my ass kicked a couple of days a week." Eventually I was teaching songwriting, and I did directed studies. So I was kind of functioning like producer, helping artists in their final years when they were doing their recording projects. And I went in and I mentored small ensembles, kids that were more writers than jazz performers, and more pop than jazz, because it was a very jazz oriented program. You can't get the
Right.
pedagogy if you don't use that, you know. Um, but, I don't know. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But, uh, by the time I got to about, man, I would say 2017, 2018, there were a few projects that had come along where I had gone out and taken a sabbatical from the college and gone back out on the road and done some things. And then I was getting to the point where the road was burning me out. Driving into the college 2 or 3 times a week was burning me out, and I was going, "I think I need to retire." So and I was getting out of the college thing at the right time because, political correctness was on its way, and I don't wanna make it sound like I do believe that political correction was a good thing in many ways, and I believe that being woke was good in certain ways, but I also think it had a downside, and the downside was that you were kinda killing meritocracy, and I don't think that's good. I think, uh, I like it when cream rises to the top. you know,
Right.
as an artist, I like that, so that's a tough one. And so I went, yeah, okay. So that's why academia is not right for me anymore. I'll go back, to just being my own boss and doing my own thing
Right.
and
So
retiring.
skipping Yeah, well, I'm glad you didn't. So skipping ahead to 2026, um, Triumph for going out on the road again, and, you had some discussions with Gil as to, if you'd be involved or not, and obviously decided that you would be. So tell us about the upcoming Triumph tour that's starting in another month or so. What's that about? What musicians are on the bill, and what cities are you playing?
Yeah, well, you and I were chatting before you hit record, and it's too bad because I
Right.
gave you all of this when we were just yicking and yakking. But so, uh, yeah, they it started because Rogers was playing the stuff on the hockey, on the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then Gil said, "Listen, I think I'm doing a deal with these vector management guys, Jason Murray, and he does Peter Frampton and Leonard Skinner's estate and blah blah blah, and you should just listen to what he's got to say, Rick." And so I took a couple of meetings with Jason, sitting here in my studio having some tea, and they kind of talked me into it. Like they made it sound like it was going to be pretty great. And part of it was they were going to build these safety nets and production, of course, Gill production, screens, digital this. Oh, it's going to be amazing show. It's not going to be just one torch, Rick. It's going to be 9 torches. So there was all of that. But then Jason's going, oh, and we're thinking, you're going to have Phil X, who was the guy that replaced me in Triumph in 1988,
Right.
like he's gonna be in the band, and, we're gonna have Todd Kearns and Brent Fitz, the rhythm section that went out with Slash and that went out with Alice Cooper and blah, 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 so I go and do a little research online about these guys. I'm going, "Oh my god, these guys are rock stars, and they're great, and this is gonna be so great to get to play with them and be in a band with them." Now the dark side, the downside of all of this is that Mike Levine's health has not been great, and, so
Right.
he hasn't really been able to wade in, rehearsals that we've been having and meetings we've been having, and, he didn't make the trip out to Edmonton when we did the little thing back in geez, it was May or June or something last year.
Right.
But that was kinda like a trial balloon. Let's see how it works, and it worked pretty good. It was fun, it was great. The rehearsal the night before was I enjoyed it. So it's like, "Okay, this could work." It's too bad that Mike, so far hasn't been able to partake, but
Right.
nevertheless, the bright side is, new musicians, new thing, and plus here's Jason, in my ear was saying, and Rick, you'll be the man. You'll be writing the script. You will be the director of all of this and the music director, and you'll be the man. And I'm going, well, okay. My ego and my ambition goes, okay, maybe I can make this work. So here we go. You know,
That's great. Well, it's pretty exciting. I've seen a lot online. I understand the ticket sales so far are going well. Obviously there's Triumph fans from the old days and probably a lot of new ones as well that have heard the music over the years. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
It is.
In your career to date from the early days to now, how have you balanced your family life when you've been on the road a lot and you've just been busy, you've been doing all these different things. How did you balance family life in general with your wife and your family?
It's never easy,
No.
and, when like, I've written a memoir for ECW Press and talked about it in length in that book, um, because there are stresses and strains that, happen, for a marriage, for family, because you are making sacrifices and compromises, because your career starts to um, make demands that you can't meet, you know, without somebody having to compromise. Somebody has to give. And fortunately, I had a wife that was willing to, sacrifice certain kinds of things. And, I feel bad about, you can't go back. I can't go back and be a parent to my you know, uh, preteen and teenaged kids, again, and I have regrets about that. Um, but you can only, life is such that you can only really just go from here. I can only figure out how to put one step ahead and move forward. You can't go back. You go back,
Right.
and that's the land of regret, and I don't want to live in the land of regret. So,
For sure.
uh, I'm grateful for the fact that my marriage survived and my family. And now, if I, at any given point in time, Jim, if you ask me, how do you prioritize things in life? I would always put family first, always. But that's really
Right.
not necessarily how things play out in life. We we tend to be selfish, and then as a career thing, and it's like, well, no, Rick, you're going to have to be in California on the May long weekend. You can't be home and be with your kids. You have to be there. But
Right.
I did get to do things like coach kids sports and baseball and soccer, and I was around. I didn't miss too many graduations or commencements. Like, you know, uh, I did prioritize it, except when I couldn't. You know, and was I the kind of selfish artist who sat practicing and writing when probably I should have been paying more attention to my family? Yes, absolutely. But
Right.
you want to
For sure.
be a world class musician. There's a certain kind there's a certain amount of playing that you have to do. There's a certain amount of practicing, and you know, um, and I'm going through it again now. But I'm 72 years old, so at this point in time, my wife is more than happy to sort of go, yeah, yeah, you go up to your studio and, go ahead and practice for the next 6 hours. I don't give a shit, like,
Right.
so, and in some ways, I think it makes my marriage healthy. It's like the whole absence makes the heart grow fonder, familiarity breeds contempt thing, where it's like, she
Right.
goes, good. Yeah, it's get out from under my feet and you go ahead and have your own life, which she encouraged me to do this Triumph reunion thing. Is like, yeah, 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 go do it. I think it's going to be great. You're going to get yourself in shape. There'll be lots of good, spin-off side effect things that happen. But you know, I'll say this, okay? I've been working out with a personal trainer. I'm feeling healthy. We had our two of our grandkids over for a sleepover the other night, and I can keep up with them. And there was a period of time where I was going, I don't think I can keep up with the grandkids anymore. But now I'm going, no, 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 I'm feeling stronger. I'm feeling better. I think I can handle this. So there are family benefits, from being involved, and I think raising the game mentally, physically as a performer, then it's like, okay, no, I get that. That could have a beneficial spin-off for my family, and I think my wife sees that and encouraged me to go ahead and do it.
Great. So just wrapping up, what advice would you give, an up-and-coming musician who's at the stage that you are at just when Triumph was forming?
Wow. Well, first of all, disclaimer. When this was something I used to do at Humber all the time is, pontificate and get up on my hind legs and bark, like as if I was a professor with something to profess. But and I think that the world changes, and I think the music business has changed so much that I don't really understand how it works. Honestly, truthfully, I would teach music business, and eventually I said to the people, the powers that be at the school, I don't think I'm qualified to do this anymore. The music business that I knew, that was record companies and publishing companies and radio, and it doesn't really exist anymore. It's a digital universe now, and you need somebody to teach this that understands the digital universe in a way that I don't. You know, um, so, my first chunk of advice would be, man, you better be digitally um, literate and incredibly literate. You need to be able to be doing your own websites and be doing your own social media. And that's critical to how you're going to be able to get, the balloon to rise, like, eh, I don't think there are fundamentals that change. I think human nature is often extremely consistent. And so I think there are things about promo and public relations and, hype. Those don't, they just take different forms. And so you need to be as educated in those things as you are about the music that you play. At the bottom of it, Jim, my biggest advice would be, you've got to believe in yourself like no one else will believe in you. Uh,
Right.
and you got to keep being able to find your way back to that belief, even when, you're having dark periods and you're having doubt. You still got to be able to find your way back to know, I believe that I have a work ethic. I can make this happen. I believe in what I have to offer, and I believe it has value. I used to teach about qualities and values as a core thing all the time. That at some point, somebody walks into a grocery store and they're going to buy stuff, and they've got to be convinced that this stuff is good and it's a good price. And that dynamic doesn't change if it's music. Somebody's got to get exposed to it and go, man, this is good. Wow, this is great. I really want this. And so how do you generate desire and likes? And, you know, that's a big part of it. So whatever it is that you make, if you make music and it's so dark and it's so inside that no one else can get it, then it's not going to happen. You need to find an audience, you need to build an audience. And then the biggest trick of all, says the 72-year-old man, is you got to keep them. So
Right.
find, build, keep. Those are three dynamics that they're all different, and they require different strategies and so strategy. Who's teaching you strategy? Are you teaching yourself? Or are you going out there and going, no, this guy knows more about strategy than I do? Because that's a big thing. Teamwork, like networking. Like, would I have had the success would I be sitting here talking to you if Gil Moore and Mike Levine hadn't walked into the Hollywood Tavern? No, you know, and I went, should I be partners with these guys? And it was really good. And it was also really bad, but I survived it. And so that's a big thing, is surviving. Like, you build these things and you make deals with managers and agents and record companies, and then you got to survive them. you know, like they can't kill you. What doesn't kill you has to make you stronger, so
Right.
that's a big part of it.
Excellent. Okay, Rick. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I really appreciate your time today. And
You're welcome.
I'm hoping the tour goes really well and that you enjoy it for sure.
Me too. We gonna see you backstage somewhere?
You never know. I'll talk to Gil about that. I'm sure we can do that.
All right, good. Well,
All right.
I
All
am
right.
looking
Take
forward
care.
to it. I think it's gonna be, an adventure that not many 70-year-olds get in their lives,
For sure.
something that's happening on a level where I go, "Okay, do I deserve this, Jim? I don't think I did anything in my life to deserve it, but am I going to try and suck all the juice out of it that I can? Absolutely, because what an
Excellent.
adventure to have. I can't wait."
For sure. Take care.
All right, Jim, thank you.